Amen. Turn to Joshua chapter 7. It's the sixth book of the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua. There you are. We'll look at a number of verses there this morning as we take care of part 3. We have one more after this, part 4 next week. But part 3 in this series called Own It. And we have been learning a lot about taking responsibility for our lives. In fact, a few of the takeaways, just to kind of catch everybody up to speed, is really to own it means to take responsibility for our lives. And what we've discovered, all of us have, that is our irresponsibility becomes someone else's responsibility. Oftentimes, you're surrounded by people that maybe have acted irresponsibly, and you've had to come up behind and kind of cover their tracks, clean up the mess behind them sometimes. And again, we all make our own messes too, so none of us are guilt-free here. But this is just a reality when it comes to responsibilities. And we've also talked about eating your own slice of the pie. Yeah, there's a lot of blame that can go around, but every once in a while we've got to own up to our attitudes, our behaviors, our decisions, our outcomes. It's easy to blame somebody else and take our eyes off of ourselves, but we got to eat our own slice of pie, all right? And then we've also talked about how the biblical principle, you will reap what you sow. You will harvest what you plant. And then but here's the good news, the hope in that is you can sow your way out of what you've sown your way into. I don't care what situation you're in today, relationally, financially, spiritually. Maybe you haven't had some outcomes that have been very pleasant or just some struggle, some difficulty. Well, guess what? You can start today and you can begin to sow your way out of what you've sown your way into. Isn't that hopeful? That's hopeful for all of us. Because none of us are perfect. The Bible says he who began a good work is faithful to complete it, which means none of us are finished. We're all unfinished, we're undone, and there's some things and changes we need to make, but as we plant good seed, we can actually experience a completely different harvest. But that's going to require us to do what we talked about last week. Do what you should have been doing all along. It's not rocket science. The scriptures are actually not as complicated as we make them. And hopefully this story that we're going to look at today will help us to understand this whole idea of taking responsibility and owning our outcomes, our attitudes, our behaviors. Now this story, it's a tiny little story in the book of Joshua. It's seemingly insignificant, but God makes a huge statement in this little story. And this story really helps us to understand a little more clearly this statement here. You can't always pray your way out of something that you've behaved your way into. Now, I'm grateful for prayer. I've taught on prayer a lot. I believe in prayer. I pray every day. I hear from God every day. I go on tons of prayer walks. God, I'm not perfect, but we got a relationship. And so I believe in prayer. But the reality is, because the Bible says we will reap what we sow, doesn't matter. Sometimes as you pray, there's still consequences that God is not going to rescue us from. And we can't always pray our way out of something that we behaved ourselves into. Now, this story is going to address a number of groups of people. Probably the first one here, again, we're looking at Joshua 7. First group of people are those of us who hide behind prayer, or sometimes we have a tendency to mask our irresponsibility with prayer. We say things like, well, I know I got an anger problem, I got an anger issue, but I'm praying about that. Well, that's good to pray about it, but maybe there's something you need to look at a little more closely in your past or something that's triggering that. It's great to pray about it, but maybe there's something you can do about it. Or some people are like, I know I got a mountain of debt. I'm praying about this mountain of debt. Well, that's good to pray about it, but there's probably some things you did that behaved your way into this mountain of debt. So sometimes we find it easy, especially as Christians, to kind of mask our irresponsibility with prayer. And we've all done this. Our irresponsibility puts us in a bind, and so what do? We pray. And again, nothing wrong with prayer. Maybe somebody, points out one of our irresponsibilities. Areas of irresponsibility, and we're like, I'm praying about that. I'm praying about that. Well, good. It's good to pray about it, but Isn't that what kind of bugs you most about, super Christian religious people? Sometimes they are the most irresponsible people on the planet. They talk the right talk, but, financially they're, upside down. They're a complete wreck because they've been irresponsibly in their finances, or maybe in their relationships. They talk the good talk, but they've blown through relationships. They've blown through marriages. And, yet it comes down to sometimes how we mask those areas of irresponsibility with religious talk, or even with prayer. Now, another group that this story kind of helps us to understand is people like you and me, and we're all guilty of these things, is sometimes we have misguided compassion. Now, we're a very compassionate church. You're probably very compassionate people. When you see somebody acting irresponsibly, getting themselves in a mess, your heart goes out to them, but sometimes it can be misguided. Because what we do is, we're like, oh, this is really a bad situation for you or for them. And all of a sudden now we start coming up with excuses and reasons of why, these things happen. And we kind of give a pass to people who have acted irresponsibly instead of holding people accountable. We have good intentions, but what happens is we begin to facilitate and enable irresponsible behavior. So this story will help us in a powerful way understand what to do about those kind of situations. So Joshua 7, let me give the context here. Let me back up. We don't want to jump into the story quite yet. Joshua 7, there's a lot happening. In fact, the first several chapters of Joshua, it's a great read. Maybe today, maybe this week, read the first few chapters of Joshua, because you got the famous courageous speech where God's like, be strong, be very courageous, Joshua, you can do this. There's also the story where Rahab the prostitute, she harbors a couple of the Jewish spies, and she drops down the scarlet rope out of her window to be a sign that she and her family are going to be saved from destruction. You've got the story of where Joshua leads them through dry ground across the Jordan. Remember when Moses led them through the Red Sea on dry ground? The same thing happens again, but now the Jordan River parts, and Joshua leads them across. So some great stories. But what's happening here in the context of Joshua chapter 7 is Moses has taken God's people as far as God is going to allow him to take them. He took them out of captivity, 400 years in bondage. He leads them out. They're wandering around in the wilderness for 40 years. It was only an 11-mile journey, but it took them 40 years. It's like, trying to go to Camp Hill, and it takes you 40 years to get to Camp Hill. Okay, 11 minutes, you'll be there, okay? That's the kind of, they were wandering around because they were disobedient, a lot of reasons. And so God said, all right, Moses, this is as far as you're going to go. So Moses basically leads them right to the precipice of the promised land, the land that God had promised his people. And, they're right on the doorstep. Moses isn't going any further. Now it's Joshua's turn. He's a military leader. He's leading 2 to 3 million people. So this wasn't just a small little gaggle of people. It was a lot of people. And so he throws a stick into the water, or actually the priests, they step foot into the Jordan River. The river parts, and the people walk through on dry ground. And now it's time to possess the land. And this is land that originally belonged to the Jewish people, but because they were in bondage, other tribes, other people, the Canaanites specifically, came and they occupied the vacuum that God's people had left. And boy, did they occupy it. They occupied it with all kinds of sin and all kinds of very sexually immoral people. They sacrificed their own children to their gods. They were godly people. They just had a lot of gods, not the one true God. And so God said, enough is enough. Now it's time to go in and possess the land. So the first city that they were going to take over was Jericho. You've heard the story. Jericho is a big walled city. And maybe you remember the Sunday school song, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho. And look at that. You're in the same Sunday school class. Yeah. Great story. And he did it in such an unusual way. He said, you're not going to lift a sword. You're not going to, enact your military might. No, you're going to walk around the city. It's going to be a cakewalk, just without the cake. You're going to walk around the city. You're going to blow your trumpets. You're going to shout at when I give you the command, and the walls are going to come tumbling down. You're not going to have to raise a sword. And so, sure enough, God delivers Jericho to the children of Israel. However, he tells them something very specific. He says, now, when you take over the city, you're going to see a lot of gold and silver laying around, a lot of precious, valuable stuff. Don't touch it. Leave it there, which was odd because that was the military custom, is when you took over a city, you would get the spoils of the city. And God said, not this time. Nope. I want you to leave it there as an offering to me. Well, that was really hard for one particular guy to leave it all there. His name was Achan, okay? And later we find he's Achan, all right? He's just Achan because, well, anyways, he saw this stuff and he's saying, oh, look at gold and silver and precious linen and all kinds. Oh, somebody's going to get it. Why not me? So what he did, he took some of the gold and silver. He took it back to his tent. He dug a hole. He buried it. Joshua didn't know about it. Nobody else really knew about it. And so he's thinking he's pulling one over, and, he ends up paying a price for it later. We'll come to find out. But Joshua, again, he doesn't know this is going on. So Joshua's like, all right, we just took Jericho. Now let's go on to the next place. Let's go on to the next place. And so the next city they confront is a little itty-bitty city called Ai. Real little tiny itty-bitty city called Ai. And that's where we pick up the story in verse 2 of chapter 7. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Joshua sent some of his men from Jericho to spy out the town of Ai, east of Bethel, near Beth-aven. Now that location means nothing to us, but back then, if they're reading this or they're hearing this story, they know exactly where this is happening. This is history. This isn't just some made-up story. This is actual history. So they're like, oh yeah, we know where Beth-aven is. It's just close to the 78-81 split. Yep, right up there, north of 81 there. Yeah, that's where it is. All right, so here they are. He sends people to spy out this little town of Ai. They come back with a report. Look at this report. When they returned, they told Joshua, there's no need for all of us to go up there. It won't take more than 2,000 or 3,000 men to attack Ai. Since there are so few of them, don't make all of our people struggle to go up there. They're like, hey, Joshua, we checked this out. They're a know-nothing town. In fact, I think if we just show up, they're going to run. All right, don't send everybody. Just send a small group of people. We can do this. Ai, little bitty city, no problem whatsoever. Well, look what happens. Joshua listens to them, and he sends 3,000 warriors. But look what happens. It says they were soundly defeated. All right, they were shocked. This is the classic case of underestimating the underdog. They didn't think this little town could do anything, and, they embarrassed them. And not only did they defeat them, but they humiliated them. Look at this next verse. It says this. The men of Ai chased the Israelites from the town gate as far as the quarries. Again, they're looking at and say, quarries, we know exactly where that's at. And they killed about 36 who were retreating down the slope. So the Israelites were paralyzed with fear at this turn of events, and their courage melted away. So again, they're shell-shocked that Ai defeated Israel, which had a reputation in that area for being a strong military. And here, they're getting embarrassed. They're getting humiliated. And they're beginning to wonder, God, why? They're wondering, they're starting to doubt God. Their courage is melting away. And they're thinking, hey, we haven't really done anything different. Why did we lose to this little itty-bitty city? What's going on here? And so now look at how Joshua and the elders responded to this defeat. They did something kind of strange. So Joshua and the elders of Israel tore their clothing in dismay. They threw dust on their heads. That's odd, isn't it? They bowed their face down to the ground, which is a form of worship and prayer, before the ark of the Lord until evening. So it's interesting. That's strange. They tear their clothes. They throw dust on their head in their attempt to find relief from their sorrow, their grief, their defeat, their failure. Let me ask you a question. What do you do when you fail? What do you do when you're defeated? How do you process that sorrow, that grief? I mean, we may look at that as strange, but other people, they try to find that relief at the bottom of a bottle, in a jar of pills, maybe some self-harm, maybe all kinds of things, some kind of substance that they need to just kind of calm themselves down, to deal with defeat, to deal with failure. I mean, I know that's strange, but that was kind of a Jewish custom. In fact, that's where Ash Wednesday has roots in this very practice, that the way that they would express grief and sorrow is they would put dust on their heads, like Catholics do Ash Wednesday, put some ash and cross on your forehead. Okay, that came right out of the Bible. But the point is, it's an odd way, but maybe it's better than internalizing grief and sorrow and imploding. They did something strange, and it's really just a reflection of how they were struggling with, and it really didn't have an answer yet to why they were defeated by Ai. So Joshua then cries out. Now he begins to ask, why, God? Oh, sovereign Lord, why? Isn't that something we do? When something happens that we didn't plan for or we didn't want, we prayed for something and we got a different result. And then we start asking, why, God? Why didn't my aunt get healed? Why did I lose my job? Why am I going through this physical crisis right now? We have all kinds of questions that we want to know. We're asking God, and there's nothing wrong with asking God, but all of a sudden, then oftentimes our questions turn to blame. Look how he's beginning to blame. He's blaming God. He's saying, why did you, God, why did you bring us across the Jordan River if you are going to let the Amorites kill us? If only now they're setting themselves up against what God maybe, what his will was. Now it's us and them. And so if only we had been content to stay on the other side. So they're questioning God. God, why did we get defeated by this little know-nothing, little itty-bitty city of Ai? And not only that, he's still kind of confronting God with this whole thing. He says, Lord, what can I say now that Israel has fled from its enemies? This is going to be bad for us. It's going to snowball because the Canaanites and all the other people living in the land, they're going to hear about it, and then they're going to surround us and wipe our name off the face of the earth because we lost to Ai. And then what will happen to the honor of your great name? In other words, we're not only embarrassed, but God, aren't you embarrassed by allowing your children to be defeated by Ai? So there's a lot of blame being kicked around here. And finally, God responds to Joshua. This is huge. This is important. Look what God says to Joshua. But the Lord said to Joshua, get up. Why are you lying on your face like this? Why are you praying? This isn't the time to pray. This is the time to get up and do something. Well, shouldn't we always pray? Yes, we should always pray. Before, during, and after. I'm not against prayer. I've taught so many sermons and series on prayer. You know I pray. But it's interesting that God is telling Joshua, this isn't the time to pray. This is the time to get up and do something. And if Joshua was really going to answer God and be honest, he would say, well, I'm basically blaming you for all the things that have happened. Now, God goes on to show them and to tell them why they were defeated by this little itty-bitty city of Ai. Look what he says. He says, Israel has sinned and broken my covenant. You want to know why? You know why you're living in defeat? Because you have sinned and you've broken my covenant. He goes on to say, they have stolen, and can you imagine Joshua? Hey, it wasn't they, it was one guy. It was Achan. It was one guy. It wasn't all of us. So God's like, no, they have stolen some of the things that I commanded must be set apart for me. And it wasn't a they, it was a he. It was one guy. But They have not only stolen them, but they've lied about it and have hidden the things among their belongings. And then we'll just keep going. He says, that is why the Israelites are running from their enemies in defeat. For now, Israel itself has been set apart for destruction. I will not remain with you any longer unless you destroy the things among you that were set apart for me. And now, the next part is huge. Look what he says. Again, he says, get up. He says it the second time. He says, get up. Quit praying. Get up and do something. I want you to command the people to purify themselves. Cleanse yourself. Go find the stash, okay? Quit thinking that you can hide things, you can hide from God. I want you to consecrate yourself. I want you to purify yourself in preparation for tomorrow. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Hidden among you, and now he calls them out, hidden among you, O Israel, are things set apart for the Lord. Now look at this next statement. This is sobering, okay? You will never defeat your enemies until you remove things from among you. Now, we can look at this story in the context of the story and say, wow, that is true for them. Could we personalize that for a moment? Do you think there's some reasons why maybe you're living in defeat? You keep circling around the same issues and problems in your own life. You're not getting the results maybe that you would desire, or maybe even that God has for you. Could it be that you and I will never defeat our enemies until we remove the things from among you? Wow. That's tough stuff. What is it that you need to remove out of your life? And maybe it's not some big sin problem. Maybe it's some attitude, some stinking thinking that has ruled you. Maybe you just allow your emotions to rule you. This little thing happens and this much anger comes out. It's like you become a slave to anger, to addiction, to thinking that takes you down the wrong path. Is there some responsibility that you and I have? Do we need to own up to some of the things that we've allowed in our lives? Now, here's why this is important. Is because this is what happens in a community. This is what happens in a community of 2, 10, several hundred, a community at large. This is what happens in a nation when one person acts irresponsibly. When one person. This battle was lost because one person acted irresponsibly. They were disobedient. He gave into his lust for stuff. And because he was so disobedient and irresponsible in his behavior, everybody paid the price. He knew what he was supposed to do. God made it clear, don't take the stuff. Everybody knew the same thing, but yet this one guy acts out, he gives into his lust, and the whole community is impacted. You may look at that and say, well, God, that's not fair. I mean, I can see going after the one guy, but do all of us have to pay the price? That doesn't seem fair. But see, that's what happens. When one person is irresponsible, it's the nature of being connected. See, what happens is what you sow, at some level, I'm going to reap because we're connected. We're in a relationship. What other people sow, guess what? You're going to reap some of the consequences because you're connected. You're in relationship. You can't just say, well, it's none of your business. Guess what? That sounds good. It sounds tough, but it's just not true. Because we're in a relationship, some behavior is going to impact you. It's going to impact somebody else. And it may not sound fair. It may not be fair. But guess what? Not only do they reap what they've sown, but you're going to reap what they've sown. Again, it's not fair, but it's true. I mean, it's not fair that maybe you've been the best wife that you've known how to be. I mean, You have. You've done everything you've known to do, but your husband has acted irresponsibility with his time, with his money, with his morality, with drinking, with whatever. And now you're like, that's not fair. I've given him chance after chance after chance. I've gone the extra mile, and this is what I get. That's the nature of being in a relationship, in community, in connection with somebody. What somebody else has sown, guess what? At some level, to some degree, you're going to reap what they have sown. That's the story of kids from divorce. They're gonna experience some negative things, and it wasn't their fault. Sometimes kids take on that blame and that responsibility, unfortunately and unfairly. But they didn't have anything to do with it, and yet it was two irresponsible adults who couldn't handle the marriage, the relationship. And it's not that, I mean, somebody's got to step up to take responsibility for that. We can't blame the kids. They had nothing to do with that. And yet, isn't it easy that we just put the blame? And it wasn't all him, and it wasn't all her. Guess what? You've got a slice of the pie that you got to deal with. How you contributed to that relationship. And what happens when we're connected with each other, not only do people reap what they sow, but people who are connected to them will reap what they sow. Now that's very sobering. And if that's not sobering enough, take a look at this next verse, because this is when God was giving the 10 Commandments to Moses and his people. Look what it says here. I lay the sins of the parents upon their children. And here it says it right there. The entire family is affected. Even children in the third and fourth generations of those who reject me. Can we just pause there for a moment? Can you let that sink in? I lay the sins of the parents upon their children. Have you ever wondered about generational curses, generational sins? It's real. And now we can get stuck there. Because, hey, who can't say, well, I own up. I've done a lot of things wrong. I've parented a certain way. I've been a husband or wife, and man, and the Bible says, he who began a good work, will complete it, which means we're not complete yet. We're unfinished. We're undone. And if we're careful, we can look at this and we can get stuck right here in guilt, in regret, in condemnation, and that's exactly what the devil wants to do. He wants to beat you up with your past. But at some level, we have to take responsibility for our actions, our attitudes, our behaviors, our decisions that we made. I mean, nobody started out that way. Nobody started out saying, let's be married for 5 years and then let's get divorced and really screw up our kids. Nobody ever started out that way. But because of decisions, attitudes, maybe we just didn't know how to be married well. Maybe we just were handed a bag of crap when we were young when it comes to relationships, and we're just trying to do the best we can. Yes, and there's grace. Love covers a multitude of sin. But at some level, we got to stop and we got to own up to our responsibility. But be careful not to get stuck here, because there's a second part of that verse. And this is where the hope begins to settle in. Because look what it says after this verse. It says this, but I lavish unfailing love for 1,000 generations on those who love me and obey my commands. Right there's the hope. We don't have to get stuck and live in the past and the regrets and the guilt and the condemnation here. We don't have to, but we need to take responsibility. We need to listen to our blame. We need to understand we're going to reap what we sow. We need to eat our own slice of the pie. We need to do the things that we know we should have been doing all along. Yes. And look what he says. On those who love me and obey my commands. There's nothing passive about there. There's nothing just sitting back praying, God, will you just do the work in me? And sometimes that's what we do as believers. We expect God to do everything, and we don't do what already He's commanded us to do. There's a responsibility that we take, but that's the promise. That I lavish unfailing love for 1,000 generations on those who love me and obey my commands. And that's right there where you begin to start sowing your way out of what you've sown your way into. It's right there. By doing what He's commanded, by loving Him. And really, that's what Jesus tried to clarify that for all of us. He said, this isn't as complicated as you're making. I know there's, classes at the church, gifts of the Spirit and all these other, that's great, but it's really down to two things. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, all your mind, and then love your neighbor as yourself. When you do that, that's when you step in to the promised land of the life that God has for us. I think this story really is a wake-up call to all of us to understand how important it is to be holy, to live holy. Can I say that without you saying, well, he's judging me. Don't judge me. I'm not talking about religion. I'm not talking about a list of do's and don'ts, and if you keep all things, then you can earn your way to heaven. I'm not talking about that. But there is a call, a cry for holiness. And I think it's so important that we understand that we need to be very intolerant of irresponsibility and sin in ourselves first and in others. We need to be intolerant. Now that's a buzzword. What? Intolerant? We're supposed to be tolerant of everybody. Yeah, until somebody disagrees with you and then they're going to cancel you out, right? It's not equal here. That's not happening, right? But sometimes we just put up with sin. We put up with irresponsible behavior. And our nation is filled with that today. We psychoanalyze people and, they have this because of that. And then we just give a pass and we just allow irresponsible behavior to be not accounted. Nobody's accountable to it. So how do you do that? How do you confront yourself when you know there's a lot of irresponsibility, and how do you confront somebody? Some of you love confrontation. Some of you can't stand confrontation. You avoid confrontation at all cost. But here's really the message of the story, and here's the message of this series here this morning. There's really no win in tolerating irresponsibility. Nobody wins. It's a lose-lose. Not only the person, but anybody connected to that person. So the best thing you can do, and I can do as a Christian, is not just to give people a free pass, but it's to lovingly confront. Now, you don't confront somebody who you really don't have a relationship with. That usually doesn't go well. But when you are connected to somebody, it's a spiritual thing. It's a church thing where we lovingly confront each other. Because we all have blind spots. We have blinders. We don't see things the way others do, and even things in ourselves. So we should be intolerant of sin and irresponsible behavior. And you may be saying, well, yeah, but I'm a Christian. That's all the more reason to lovingly confront. But what about the love of Jesus? Have you read the New Testament and how Jesus handled irresponsible people? The woman caught in the act of adultery. He accepted her. He loved her, but guess what? He said, go and sin no more. He didn't tolerate the sin. There's a way, and sometimes our compassion gets so misguided. We create this story of, she didn't know any better, or, if he had this kind of bad background, and granted, yes, but at some point, we have to own up and take responsibility for ourselves and for others, because irresponsibility is contagious. It really starts when we look in the mirror, though, instead of out the window. And Jesus taught that. Before you take the speck out of your brother's eye, you got to take the plank out of your own. But when you take the plank out of your own, then you'll be able to see more clearly the speck. So there's a speck. but you got to take the plank out yourself first, and then you can deal appropriately. And that's where prayer really comes in, is to prepare your heart to lovingly confront. So you're doing it with the right attitude and in the right way. Now, here's what happens to the rest of the story. Joshua does exactly what God told him to do. He gets up. He quits praying, and he stands up, and he does what God told him to do. It's time to act, Joshua. Don't hide behind your prayers anymore. Don't blame me anymore. You need to clean the camp. There's sin in the camp, and you can't tolerate it. You got to get rid of it. So what he did, he sent out a search party, and sure enough, they find in the corner of Achan's tent all the silver and gold that he had hid. And so they take that back to Jericho. They punish Achan and his whole family. They're stoned to death. And they, as an example for what others shouldn't do. And so then they attack Ai, and guess what? They beat Ai this time because they cleaned up the camp. They got rid of the sin in the camp. Now, here's the questions I want to leave us with here this morning as we look at this story. These are thought-provoking questions. You might want to put your steel-toe shoes on. Here we go. Here's the first one. Am I hiding behind my prayers? Am I hiding behind my prayers, or do you need to finally stand up and do something? Are you just going to pray about CRT? Critical race theory? Are you just going to pray about it? Oh, I hope it doesn't hit our school. Are you going to get on the school board? Are you going to go to the school board meetings? You're going to get up and do something about it? You didn't like the results of the election, or you wish another administration was in there? Are you going to be involved in polling? Are you going to be involved in learning about the policies that are being passed right underneath your nose? Are you just going to pray and then complain about it? Or complain first and maybe pray about it and do nothing? Are you going to continue to say to people, hey, I'm praying for you, I'm praying for you, and you don't pray for them? And you don't lift a finger to go help them, maybe to go visit them, to go help them with this thing that they're really overburdened with right now. See how sometimes we use prayer to mask our irresponsibility? Sometimes we're the best, complainers on the planet as believers. And we wonder why our world, our government, all this stuff is just out of control. And it's probably because we did too much praying and enough doing. Being involved, being active, and speaking up, and having an influence. I mean, that's what James said. In the same way, faith by itself, if it's not accompanied by action, is dead. So praying and faith, yes, but it's got to be accompanied with action. You see, and some of us, we pray about the same things over and over and over. The same things. Our prayer life, it's the same thing. God's bored with it. And you're praying about things that I've already covered in the Word of God. That's how you know if you're praying about the same things that there's no... God's already covered in the Word, in His Word. Guess what? You don't have to pray about being honest. Be honest. It's not something you have to pray about. You don't have to pray about paying your taxes. Jesus covered that. Give unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Well, get involved in the process. If you don't like tax policy, get involved in the process. Get up and do something about it. Just don't pray about it. That's already covered. You don't have to pray about being faithful to your wife, sir. Covered. He already covered that. Students and singles and older singles who have been there and done that, guess what? You don't have to pray about not having, if premarital sex is appropriate before marriage. You don't have to pray about it. That's already covered. Done deal. Get up and do something. Instead of kind of waiting around at your house and your parents go to bed and you decide to lay on the couch with your boyfriend or girlfriend and you throw in a movie at 11 o'clock at night and you got a blanket over you, like, right, that's going to turn out right. Get up and do something about it. Don't tolerate sin. Say, I had a great night tonight. Man, I'm going to go home and get sleep, so I'll see you at church in the morning. I'll see you at youth group Sunday night. Don't tolerate it. And don't pray about it. It's already covered. Get up and do something about it. Well, I don't know what my ministry is. Yes, you do. Jesus couldn't be more clear. Go and make disciples. Plain and simple. That's all of our assignment. It may look different than other people. You're making disciples maybe in a recovery group where, you're helping other men or women to get through something that you've already found victory in. And you're a disciple. You're walking with them. It may be in the financial world. You're a whiz financially, but you're helping other believers or other people to understand, there's a way to manage God's finances that bring honor and that advance the kingdom, and you're going to be blessed as a result. Maybe you're going to be discipling people that way. It looks different. Not everybody has to be up here and be a pastor or go overseas and be a missionary. We can all go and make disciples. That's already covered. Don't be confused about what you're doing in life. Just begin to do that. There'll be things that come along your way that will pay to keep food on the table. But it's not just that. God looks at it as, I'm supplying you so you can do my will on earth as it is in heaven. I'm going to buy the CD myself. Encouraging myself for a moment here. Lord, you know me. Okay. So the second thing is this. That was a pretty tough one for one. We got two more and we'll be done. Why don't you, Rachel, you better get up here. Otherwise, when you start coming up, I get a little nervous and I need to wrap this up. But the second thing is this. Am I hiding behind my prayers? And then number two, am I trying to pray my way out of something I've behaved my way into? Again, we've kind of already talked about this. The importance is don't substitute prayer, and prayer is good, great. Again, pray before you make a decision, pray during, and pray after, but don't substitute prayer for irresponsible behavior. I mean, if you're praying for your kids, but you're not engaging them, get up and do something about it. If you're praying for your kids, but you're not disciplining them, maybe you don't know how. Maybe you're disciplined in the wrong way, and now the pendulum has swung, and now you hardly discipline your kids because you want to be their friend. Or maybe it was so loose in your home that you are so strict, and you as a parent, and you just let them get by with everything. Or get up and do something about it. If you're praying to, God, deliver me from this debt, but you're not interested in dealing with how you behaved your way into that mountain of debt, get up and do something. We offer all kinds of financial classes through the year where you can do something. Somebody will sit down with you. We have couples in the church who will sit down across the kitchen table with you and help you to work on a budget and help you to live within your means and to learn how to manage money God's way. Do something about it. You want to get good grades? Guess what? You got to get up and do it. You got to study. You're kind of compromising with the internet. Well, put a filter on the internet. Get some accountability around you. Instead of just thinking that, I can keep doing the same thing but expect different results. That's, what that is. Definition of insanity. You're praying about your health, but you really haven't eaten right, you haven't gotten exercise, get up and do something about it. You don't have to pray about that. Get up and do something about it. The third thing is this. I better move on before I run all y'all out of the church. Just kidding. Am I compensating for irresponsibility and sin in myself and in someone around me? Maybe it's a group of friends. Maybe you got a group of friends, students that, they're doing some things that you just kind of got that little red flag going up inside. Maybe and everybody else is doing it. They're doing some TikTok stuff. They're kind of a little risque. They're, you guys are watching some movies that aren't rated maybe that God would be honored in. And, maybe at work it's, the guys are cussing, the guys are passing around pictures, and, it's just so easy just to kind of laugh so you fit in. tolerating certain things. Now, it's not that you go and say, guys, would you stop cussing around me? That's not going to work well. But you don't have to join in. You don't have to get caught in that trap. You don't have to try to fit in. You don't have to tolerate the sin and the irresponsibility around you. And as you make a stand, and I've proven this in my own life, being on a University of Wisconsin campus for 2 years, I was a born-again believer. I held my ground in my faith. I wasn't obnoxious about it, but I didn't go to the bars on the weekends. I didn't sleep with girls. I didn't do any of that stuff. And all of a sudden, guys in my dorm were starting to notice, why don't you do this stuff? You don't even talk the way we talk. What is it about you? I didn't open up my Bible and say, well, this is why, thus saith the Lord. I just began to relate to them and tell them, Jesus changed me. Eventually get around where Jesus changed my life. That's why. It's not because I'm an extra good person. It's I've had a change in my life. Jesus has saved my soul. And all of a sudden, wow, we begin to be an influence. You see, ignoring somebody's sin is not a loving thing to do. Ignoring somebody's irresponsibility, especially when you're in relationship with them, it's not a loving thing to do. It doesn't help them, it doesn't help you, or it doesn't help anybody connected to them. So some tough homework assignments here today. Next week, I want to talk a little bit more about, okay, so there is someone acting irresponsibly around me. How do I deal with them in a loving way? That sounds great, Pastor Mike. I've tried that. I've done that. It's ended up worse. I thought I had the right heart. I thought I was saying the right thing, and it just blew up in my face. So how do you deal with jerks? Next week. And maybe it's looking in the mirror. So we'll wrap up this Own It series next week. But maybe to wrap it up this morning, I could have you stand. And I want us to sing a song that really is based out of that Exodus verse that we looked at. I lay the sins of the parents upon their children, and the entire family is affected. And I think there's a moment that needs to happen here before we wrap up this service, and we'll be dismissed in just a moment. But where we come clean, where we acknowledge, I'm going to be honest with you, God, there's sin in the camp. And maybe for you, it's not some heinous sin that you would never tell anybody. Maybe it's some attitude, some stinking thinking that you've allowed in your head, some thoughts. Maybe you've been giving into temptation because you've allowed things that you should have removed. Maybe there's some bitterness towards your parents for this. You've been affected, and you maybe had little to do with it. Maybe to some degree, you were a victim. I don't really believe that there's very many people that are 100% victims. There are. But you've been affected by, and maybe there's a bitterness towards a parent, towards somebody in your past, maybe even towards God. And you need to deal with that just for a moment this morning and get rid of the sin in the camp. And have a moment, and I really believe it's kind of a call to repentance here today. To take responsibility for what you and I have allowed in our hearts and our lives. Would you do that with me? I'm not going to have you come forward. I mean, you can if you want, but would you pray with me today? And maybe would you, just by a hand raised today, say, Pastor Mike, I'm dealing with something right now. I'm dealing with a behavior, a thought pattern, something that's brought a lot of dysfunction to my life, and I don't want to pass it down to my kids anymore. Just slip up your hand wherever you are. We're going to pray together here. All right, God bless you, so many of you. Yes, thank you, God. Thank you, Lord. Thank you. This is a moment to repent, to come clean. Don't be found out. You be the one that removes the things in advance. Would you pray with me today? God, come on, let's all pray this together. God, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry
for thinking I can hide from you.
for thinking that I can hide from you.
I'm sorry for not taking responsibility
I'm sorry for not taking responsibility
for things that I've allowed
for things that I've allowed
in my life.
in my life.
I don't want to blame anymore.
I don't want to blame anymore.
I don't want to blame others.
I don't want to blame others.
I don't want to blame you.
I don't want to blame you.
I don't want to blame our culture.
I don't want to blame our culture.
I'm going to take responsibility
I'm going to take responsibility
for my life.
for my life.
I'm going to take responsibility for my
I'm
attitudes.
going to take responsibility for my attitudes.
I'm going to own my outcomes.
I'm going to own my outcomes.
But Lord, I confess to you today
And Lord, I confess to you today
the sin in my life,
the sin in my life,
how I've been irresponsible
how I've been irresponsible
with my time,
with my time,
my
my
finances,
finances,
my relationships.
my relationships,
The list goes on.
and the list goes on.
I'm coming clean today.
I'm coming clean today.
I know I can't hide from you.
I know I can't hide from you.
And I ask you to forgive me.
And I ask you to forgive me.
I ask you to forgive me.
I ask you to forgive me.
I know you only need to hear it once, but I need to say it again. I ask you to forgive me.
I ask you to forgive me.
I receive your forgiveness now.
I receive your forgiveness now.
I'm forgiven.
I'm forgiven.
I don't have to live in my past.
I don't have to live in my past.
I'm going to learn from my past,
I'm going to learn from my
but
past.
I'm not going to live in my past.
But I'm not going to live in my past.
I want to experience your lavish love
I want to experience your lavish love
into 1,000
into
generations,
1,000 generations,
to my children and my children's children.
to my children and my children.
So, Lord, I take a step out of the past.
Lord, I take a step
I
out
take
of
a
the
step
past.
out of regret.
I step out of
I
regret.
step out of condemnation.
Step out of condemnation
And I live in the love that you have for me.
that you have for me.
And I'm going to live a blessed life.
And I'm going to live a
My
blessed
children are going to be blessed.
My children are going
My
to be
children's children are going to be
blessed.
blessed.
My children's children
And I
are gonna be
declare
blessed.
blessing over my
And I
life
declare a blessing
and everybody
over my
who's
life.
connected to me.
And everybody who's
In
connected to
Jesus'
me.
name. Amen. Hallelujah. Praise God. Thank you, Lord. Just think about the influence and the difference this is going to make for generations to come. Let's start sowing some good things, planting some good seeds. Amen? There's hope for all of us. God bless you. Have a great week. We'll see you real soon.